We're learning today that a new book that is coming out by Donna Brazile, the former acting chair of the Democratic National Committee, that the campaign of Secretary Hillary Clinton was far more influential at the Democratic Party, the Democratic National Committee, than we previously knew. Do you think, though, that what we're learning from Donna Brazile's book suggests that the campaign, that what the Democratic National Committee did, meant this election was rigged?
Yeah, I think it was.
It's a pretty powerful charge.
Presumptive Democratic nominee Hillary Clinton has won the Democratic presidential primary in the state of California.
Win here in California topped off an historical moment for the Democratic presumptive nominee, Clinton winning 56% of the vote in the Golden State.
Well, you could be surprised to learn that as many as 3 million votes are left uncounted this morning, and that it could be weeks before they have all been tallied.
Potential million or more, maybe 2 million. I even today heard 3 million potentially ballots still to be counted.
In fact, the quote was, "Provisional ballots will be your best friend all day."
Oh, provisional supply kit.
I don't think anybody really had any idea about the significance of what ballot would be counted when.
Less than a week to go before the Golden State primary. The new NBC News Wall Street Journal Mayor's poll has a tight race in California.
Wow! Senator Bernie Sanders seeming to gain momentum in California, which holds its primary in a week.
Clinton needs the win to try to remove any legitimate rationale for him to remain in the race.
A Bernie Sanders win in California is a political earthquake.
Sanders actually has a 1-point lead, 48-47.
It looks to me like we got a lot of people here ready for a political revolution.
That the headlines will be Clinton clinches the number of delegates needed to win the nomination, but loses California.
First time in our nation's history that a woman will be a major party's nominee.
Well, you could be surprised to learn that as many as 3 million votes are left uncounted this morning, and that it could be weeks before they have all been tallied.
Potential million or more, maybe 2 million. I even today heard 3 million potentially ballots still to be counted.
How many people did you guys turn away today?
Hillary Clinton is currently leading by about 440,000 votes. So California is not a done deal?
I look forward to the full counting of the votes in California, which I suspect will show a much closer vote than the current vote tally.
Bernie Sanders knew that when the uncounted votes were tallied, the results would get much closer. He should have been predicting he was going to win the California primary. On election night, June 8th of 2016, the only votes that were officially tallied were votes that were counted by the voting machines. In those votes were Democrats who were voting in the Democratic primary. They were handed a ballot that was counted by the machines. First-time voters, independent voters, or Republicans choosing to vote in the Democratic primary could only get a vote slip that would be counted by the voting machines if they asked for a crossover, Democratic crossover ballot. That ballot would be counted by the machines on election night. If the voter was not educated and did not know to ask for a crossover ballot, he or she was given a provisional ballot that would be counted later by hand in Sacramento, California. Those votes are the 2 to 3 million votes that were uncounted on election night.
I have to say the magical phrase, "Hello, I should like a Democratic crossover ballot, please."
But what the hell exactly happened in California, right? That's what everyone's wondering. We're told Hillary won 13%, by 13%. But how could that be when Bernie Sanders was packing packing out arenas at every speech, while Hillary held her rallies at the patio section of a Hooters. Well, lucky for Hillary, the voter suppression in California is already part of the system there. As journalist Greg Palast explained, California independent voters are allowed to vote in the Democratic primary. They are, which should be great for Bernie Sanders. He beats Hillary by 40 points among independents, and there are 4.2 million independents in California.
Polling data showed that Bernie Sanders outpolled Hillary Clinton by 40% among independent voters. If those trends also apply to first-time voters and Republicans voting for the Democrat, Bernie should have easily won the California primary. If there's 2 million votes yet to be counted, and Bernie Sanders gets 70% of the votes and Hillary gets 30% of those votes, that would be a 40% polling differential. Bernie would have got 1.4 million extra votes. Hillary would have got 600,000. Bernie would have won the California primary by 400,000 votes.
But if you go to the polls on Election Day and say, I'm an independent and I want to vote in the Democratic primary, you are automatically given a ballot without the presidential race. And even if you then say, how do I vote in the Democratic primary? The poll workers are instructed to respond, independent or non-party voters can't get Democratic ballots. So the only way to get to vote in the presidential primary is if you say the secret code words, I want a Democratic crossover ballot.
A great democracy does not make it harder to vote than to buy an assault weapon.
There's so many things that you can mess up as a clerk walking in off the street. They just pull you off the street. That you're literally taking, that person is in charge of hundreds of votes and they don't even know the rules to make it a valid vote to help the voter. They're literally making it worse.
It's like the game Mousetrap.
Reason to vote won't be counted in California. You are not at the address that is listed.
Signature doesn't match.
If your vote by mail is stolen.
Registration has been switched to another party.
Didn't get a vote by mail envelope.
Voter gets to sign provisional.
So if you're a college student or you're housing insecure on an NPP ballot, you didn't fill out all of the lines in the provisional envelope.
So on election night 2016 in the California primary, 2 million independent voters, first-time voters, or Republicans voting in the Democratic primary did not have their votes counted by the machines. Instead, they were counted later up in Sacramento, California, by the Secretary of State's office. And the Secretary of State of California happened to be a Hillary Clinton supporter. And the rules say, if signatures do not match, you don't count the vote. So, if your official name on the voting rolls is Joe K. Smith, and you signed your ballot Joe Smith without the K, they could throw your ballot away. Or if your address didn't match, if your legal mailing address is 1421 Hazelnut Lane Northeast, and you wrote 1421 Hazelnut Lane on your ballot, they could throw your ballot in the garbage and not count it.
Parties make the rules about who can participate in their primary. It is very frustrating.
It should not be this difficult. 19,230 people for vote by mail who are likely not to get counted, plus 38,000 people who aren't going to be counted as provisionals, 60,000 people just in LA who took the time to vote, made the effort, educated themselves, went through the process, and now will be disenfranchised. Like, that's a whole stadium of people.
Your vote could be the one that counts. A difference of only a few votes can decide an election.
After seeing how many people, how many young people have been just pulled into this election and having this be the result or this what happened, during their first experience voting, it makes me feel sad.
After being a poll inspector, I feel like democracy doesn't exist.
Well, jaded is an understatement.
It was soul-crushing, to be honest. I did not feel like it was democracy that day.
It can be a little disappointing at times to think that this is our democracy.
That made me so sick to my stomach.
I guarantee it's the craziest trap you'll ever see. I knew you were a winner.
I had my initial training on May 17th. The woman that I was sitting with
was telling me all about this, poll worker, like subculture that they have and all their flair that they wear on their, their stuff. It was so cute, and it made me feel confident sitting there that I was with people that have been doing this, since the Truman years. So we came to that part and how to process no party preference voters. The woman that I was sitting next to, she started making notes, in the margins of her book saying, oh, this is new.
They're the only handbook I've seen so far that explicitly says, do not inform the voter. And so now they're going against the Secretary of State's own training, which is supposed to be uniform statewide. I mean, that's the fair way to run an election, isn't it?
I'm listening to the instructor, and he's saying that all non-party preference voters have to specify what ballot they want, or they're going to be given provisional ballots by default.
I have to say the magical phrase, hello, I should like a Democratic crossover ballot, please.
So you're telling us that provisional ballots will be the default ballot unless non-party preference voters specifically ask for a different ballot? Yes.
Reintroduction of that crossover ballot is really, what's unnecessarily complicating this, and combined with the fact that vote by mail has become so popular. Just send them one of each ballot.
I am of the belief the Democrats wanted this election to be messy because it benefited the candidates that had been organizing from the start, who has older voters, who have more experience in voting.
The primary is the most complex election that we conduct in the state of California. There are elements of it that by design are challenging for voters, cumbersome for poll workers, and difficult to administer.
Experts spoke about California's record voter registration and the need for improvement, such as making sure no party preference voters, a voter bloc believed to heavily favor Sanders, could easily vote for president.
For no party preference voters, it was honestly quite a challenge. We tried everything we could think of with our limited budget to make sure the information was out there.
If you're aware of the mistake when you're making it, can you still call it a mistake?
The Secretary of State, of course, is close with Hillary Clinton. There are whole numbers of so-called Democrats in this state that don't seem to care about votes being this counted and thrown away. It's profoundly disturbing.
What do you make of the fact that the Secretary of State, which is the person who's responsible for handling elections, is a partisan position? Like, doesn't that seem like a conflict of interest in any state for the Secretary of State to endorse a candidate?
And I understand we're all people, we're going to have our leanings, but I mean, he was actively campaigning for it. And then you're also designing policies which have a direct effect on what voting groups come out. In terms of restricting MPP voters in this election, I think it's pretty blatant.
In fact, the quote was, provisional ballots will be your best friend all day.
Oh, provisional supply kit.
I don't think anybody really had any idea about the significance of what ballot would be counted when. If I were to put a percentage on it, 40% of them were provisional, and a lot of them were vote by mail.
Out of 319, they give out 70 provisional ballots.
Less than 275 people that showed up to vote, and we gave out 57 provisional ballots.
I shared a precinct in Pasadena where I witnessed 157 provisional votes out of 300. That's more than half.
We had about 54 provisional voters. It was mostly young people that were on the list.
We had polling locations that had 80% of the ballots that were being cast at any one moment being provisional.
All of those are provisional from today? So has it been down all day? Are you kidding? No, how many is there right there? I don't know. I'm sorry. There's like 200 ballots there.
Basically, the way the ROV instructed us to give out provisional ballots was like an NFL player in a strip club making it rain.
The fact that poll workers are just handing out provisionals like candy, just like, here you go, without questioning why the person might even need it in the first place, really disenfranchises the voter, and oftentimes voters are not even educated that they need to keep their ticket stub from the provisional ballot to check and make sure it's even counted.
Comparatively to other states where they have very low rates of validation, California does validate and count provisional ballots at a very high rate.
This was the number of provisional ballots cast. So at best, 38,700 voters in LA County alone are going to be disenfranchised on provisional ballots. That's the number that they're proud of, where they're like, hey, we do better than anyone else. We